I will do our normal opening. So in accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read section G1 MRSA subsection 403A, public proceedings through remote access during the declaration of state of emergency due to COVID-19. This business meeting is being held with a mix of in-person and virtually through Zoom. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Miranda.org. Please be aware that we are doing with audio. Due to the change in the format of this board of directors meeting, please be aware that during the course of this meeting, the microphones of the viewing audience will be muted except during the identified portions of public comments at this meeting. For today's agenda, this is number 3. There is a chat feature in Zoom, but we will not be utilizing this feature for the meeting. And if you have any questions or comments, we respectfully ask that you contact the central office, email the superintendent, or any board member, and an answer will be provided to you as soon as possible. We ask the public's patience during these highly unusual circumstances.
It's terrible.
We are going to proceed to a roll call vote to start with our roll call for attendance, and then all votes will be done through roll call as well. So when your name is called, please cast your vote with the 3 available options of yes, approve, no, disapprove, or abstain. So here we go. Donna, do you mind trying to send to Kim again? She's saying that it's invalid. I'm not sure. Okay. Okay, well, we'll
There's a
check
lot
in
of
as we go
feedback.
across here. So I'll come back to Kim in just a second. Wendy.
Yeah, here.
Dave. Here. Kathy. Here. Melissa.
Melissa?
I don't know where Melissa went.
So no Melissa? Not right now?
No.
Okay, we'll try again. Alex?
Here.
Patty?
Here.
Rebecca?
Here.
Patty is absent today. Sean?
Here.
Barry?
Here.
And David? Here. Let me try again. Kim, she just said she got it.
Yeah,
Kim, are you
she's
there
in.
now?
I'm in.
All
Thank
right,
you.
excellent.
That's why I always come in person. Apparently I can't handle it.
So the first thing we have on our agenda tonight, if it's okay to just jump in, Dr. Carr, Sean had asked for a short presentation on what we were doing for our students around mental health, and how do they know, what resources do we have, how do they know how to get it, and what are we doing for check-ins with students. So I did talk briefly with the guidance staff, and they put together a short presentation. Our guidance staff, just so everyone knows, is Kim Murray and Sarah Chisholm at the high school, Gwen Moeller at the middle school, and Tara Wicks and Becky Barney split our elementary schools. So they did put together a presentation today, and they will be presenting from home for a couple of different issues. I'm not sure if Kim's the lead on it or not. She's the one I've been doing the most talking with.
We have it split up, and I think Gwen's going to start us off.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Kim. All right, Gwen, the floor is all yours to start with. Diane will signal us in just a second.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Gwen Moeller, the school counselor at the middle school. And yes, we're hoping to provide you with a little bit of information tonight about how we support the mental health of our students. So we'd like to start with a little bit on what we're doing for prevention, which we think is really important. So one of the things that we feel so lucky about in our district is that we have a very strong focus on building relationships with our students. And we also feel lucky that we have curriculum and a strong emphasis on teaching social emotional learning. So those things are huge, I think, in prevention. So in the middle school and the high school, we are using the social emotional learning curriculum called Second Step. And at the high school, they're using Maine's, the Department of Education's curriculum that has been put together by the Maine DOE. And these curriculums are so important because they teach really important what are the five core competencies of social emotional learning, which is self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and also responsible decision making. And so those things are taught through those curriculums, and they help to prevent, I think, social emotional struggles in our students. The next thing that we do is we also have a very strong advisor program in grades 6 through 12. And that curriculum, the goals and the activities of the advisor program also help our students build strong coping skills, strong relationship skills, understanding other people and their impact on their behavior on other people, et cetera. So that is also a very strong preventive program that we have. We also we know that students feeling isolated or maybe having fewer ways to connect with other students or their peers is more of a challenge. We do have some extracurricular, luckily some activities that are happening, and we hope that'll continue. But we also have a large number of virtual clubs and activities at the high school and the middle school. There's over 20 in the middle school alone. And so those things are really also help to build those social skills and that social awareness. In the elementary level, even pre-pandemic, those things are typically more community-based. But those are strong prevention type activities. We also do, teach students about relevant, really like important topics relevant to teens at the middle school and high school through Healthy Decisions Days. Last year, for example, we did a suicide prevention awareness assembly and some other follow-up activities with our students. And this year we are planning to do some vaping education. So those are also things that help our students to build healthy, healthy skills and coping strategies. We have lots of connections with parents through phone calls and email, newsletters, conferences, those kinds of things. Those are very important. High school and middle school also has a silent mentor program, which is really cool. So what that means is in a staff meeting, staff look at a list of all the students in the school and put an X next to any student's name that they have a connection with. And then we look at those students that have maybe 0, 1, or 2 connections, and then staff volunteer to specifically build relationships with those students. So that's really designed to help, students who might get missed or fall through the cracks, and high school and middle school are doing that. We even took it a step further at the middle school this year. We asked the students just recently if they had a trusted adult at school, and we had over 200 of our students complete the survey, and 92% of them said they had a trusted adult at school. And that's way higher than I think you'll see on any national surveys or things like that. So we felt really good about that, especially given these trying, times in a different school year. Let's see, we also have, each school has like response to intervention teams, and we have the health center at the high school, the wellness center at the middle school. We have lots of other places, a freshman team at the high school where we talk about students that are struggling and that might be at risk and how we can put supports in place for them, IEP meetings, those kinds of things. So with respect to suicide prevention in particular, so those are many of the things that we're doing that are for prevention. We have a very strong suicide prevention, is pretty comprehensive program, which is required by the state. And recently, for example, one of the components is that we train all staff to recognize warning signs, know what to say if a student is talking about suicide and those kinds of things. And we just recently trained all of our staff on December 9th. So that, and that has to happen every 5 years. Each school in our district also must have trained gatekeepers, which are staff that go to a special training on suicide prevention. And so we have trained gatekeepers in each of our school. Most of us have been trained in the last, I know I was trained last year. So in the last couple of years. We also have a protocol. So every staff member knows what steps to take if they have a student that's talking about suicide or threatening suicide, or they're really concerned about that student. And they have that to refer to, and that has the phone numbers of administrators and what steps to take. It also has the crisis hotline number on it. If a student if there is concern about the student, the nurses, and I know the school counselors, are trained to use the Columbia Suicide Severity Scale, and we use that to assess risk and determine what steps or what needs to happen next to support that student. We also teach suicide prevention in health class. That happens in the high school and the middle school. And also in the middle school, we also do some of that I team teach with the health teacher. And we did a lot of that on Teams last year. There's a curriculum called Lifelines that I've been to trainings for. And that also is, I think, really important with our students. So they have skills to recognize warning signs in peers and what to do. And the other thing that we have is we also have very active emergency and crisis teams. And those teams, I know in the middle school, we meet probably twice a month, sometimes every week. It depends on what's going on. And we also have emergency crisis protocols that are in place for in the event of any emergencies with our students. So I think that covers our first slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Becky now, who is going to talk about what kinds of supports are available to our students.
Thanks, Gwen. I'm Becky Vining, and I am the counselor at Reedfield and Manchester Elementary Schools. The next question that was asked is what's available to our students for support. In every school, we have school counselors and school nurses available for every student, and we work very collaboratively together. If nurses are seeing repeat kids, sometimes it ends up not being something that's physical. And so I know in my schools, the nurses reach out to me. So we work very collaboratively. We also have in each school a school-based counselor who, different ones. I have the same one for both of my schools, but there's, one's for the middle school, one's for the high school, and they come from Kennebec Behavioral Health. And we refer to them if we feel a student needs a little more support, or the family might need support, or they need more time. And I can refer them. Teachers have often referred, and parents can ask for that. So that's available at every school. As Gwen had said, the advisory programs at the middle school and high school are very strong and very important. So the middle school and high school has that. The high school has the help center, and which also has the expanded services if that's wanted by the parents, and the wellness center at the middle school. We have special ed case managers and behavioral support staff for the kiddos. And lastly, we do make referrals to outside agencies or outside therapists if a family or student isn't comfortable either having KBH or they just need a little more support. We make referrals outside of the school and outside of KBH. So And I think that was it. And also, I mean, we have teachers in every school who are, like Gwen said, the number of kids who feel they have a trusted adult, and that's a great testimony to our great teachers. So, so Tara, I believe, will be doing this next slide.
Thanks, Becky. So how do students know what help is available? Well, first of all, I'll say I'm Becky's counterpart, Tara Wicks. I work at Mount Vernon and Wayne Elementary Schools. And we let students know what's available to them when they transition. And the transition times are kindergarten, 5th to 6th grade, and 8th to 9th grade. And so when our kindergartners come in, Becky and I always visit the classrooms and explain what a school counselor is and what the program might look like. And usually under the guise of being the feelings teacher, and explaining to kids. And we introduce and reintroduce ourselves every year, because it takes a few years for kids to really understand what is like, what the kids are, what we do for work. I just got distracted because all of a sudden I saw myself. And then from 5th to 6th, we start in 5th grade talking to the kids in the spring about the wellness center at the middle school and explaining that the services continue if they want it up there. And also that happens from 8th to 9th in the same way. There's a lot of transition activities that involve the wellness center and the guidance offices there. Most of our referrals come predominantly from teachers and staff members and advisors at the middle school and high school level. Parents do refer sometimes, will call us directly, and also students will refer whenever there's concerns. So we get that information from a variety of people, and that's just because we know that they know that we're out there. There is information in both the student handbook and the school handbooks about our services, and most of us have some kind of information or newsletter that goes out either monthly, usually it's monthly or bi-monthly, about our services. And I know at the high school level, those counselors do special events for the kids a lot and try to get into classrooms. And Gwen gets into classrooms. Sometimes Becky and I are into classrooms routinely, at least twice a month. So we get to know all the kids, and that's how they know we're there. So we try to be present and visible as much as possible. And I think that's it for me. And I'm going to hand it over to Kim.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about how we're checking in with students at all the grade levels. So I think Diane's going to switch the slide for me. So during COVID, it's a little bit different than during a typical year. So we sort of focus this on what this year is looking like. So we're meeting with students both in person and either through Zoom or Google Meets, depending on our school. So the high school uses Zoom, the middle school uses primarily Google. We definitely utilize that advisor system at the middle school and the high school, and then those classroom teachers that are with the students all day at the elementary school as that strong adult connection. And that's how we do the SEL delivery of that curriculum. We have individual meetings either with the school counselor or the nurse, and those can be self-referred by the student, referred by a staff, referred by a parent, or we're targeting at-risk students based off of all of our collaborative meetings that we have weekly. So if a student is popping up as a student of concern at freshman team, for example, then Sarah or I will reach out to them and have a meeting with them. We also do check-ins and minute meetings, and that's a little bit different than the individual meetings because they're not specifically for a student at risk. They're more that we sort of mass schedule them, like we try to get all the freshmen in at a certain point of the school year, and we're meeting each student for a few minutes at a time just to make sure they know who we are, they know what we can offer, and if there is something we can help them with, they have an opportunity to have that meeting with us. And then we definitely follow up with students post-intervention. So if we were to have called crisis for a student who was experiencing suicidal thoughts, like we do through our suicide prevention protocol, we would follow up with them when they return to school to make sure that we're providing them all the supports that they need while they're in school. The high school and middle school utilize email with our students. All the students have a laptop, so they can email us and we can email back quite quickly. The elementary school uses Seesaw. And the only thing that I would add is that at least at the high school level, some students have been utilizing the Google Hangouts, which is the chat box on the Google email suite, to contact us and let us know that they're in need of a meeting. So I will turn it over to Sarah Chisholm, who's gonna handle the questions.
Okay, so we've presented a lot of information to you guys tonight. At this point, we just want to open it up to anybody if you have any questions about what we've presented to you, or if there's something that we might have missed, feel free to ask.
I have a couple of statements. And, all it is in the family. Probably shouldn't be talking about just personal experience. When COVID's in a family, the individual who has it, depending on the degree that they have it, will talk about suicide in 2 to 3 months. That's what I mean. It's not something cool, but if I had little kids in the house, I would say, you as a school need to know who those COVID parents are, and I think you need to highlight those kids, because an adult talking about suicide in a house is not cool. And I think it was hard to get my wife off the subject. And it lasts for 2 to 3 months. To this day, she can only walk 2 miles and she's out with here. So it's their lungs have come up, but it's a long ways to go. It affects the lungs terribly, and it's like, I don't want to live because I have a lung problem. I can't do what I normally do. And they go down that path, which would affect everybody in the house. So the only thing I didn't hear you mention is when you see the COVID people, I would suggest that you highlight those kids and who they are, because I don't want them to fall into that trap. I mean, we're out of that now, but to get out of it is not cool. I mean, the calendar right now, we only got 2 weeks to go this month. I got 3 appointments for them. That just tells you how much time and spending the time. I had COVID, I had no symptoms, no nothing. I had a plasma. She's helped 5 people recover. So there is some positive, and when you start to see the positive, every time I see her going downhill, hey, 5 people, and they're still alive. Let's talk about the positive and get them off of that subject. I would like you to look at COVID. And there is something on Facebook, and she's on there all the time. I'm not on Facebook. I stay away. It's trouble. And it's called COVID recovery. And people help each other on that on Facebook. That's all I have to say. Go ahead.
So I have a question for our staff. Is it hard to engage remote learners, students, or about?
The audio is not coming through. I'm sorry. We're having a hard time here.
We can't really hear you guys very well.
Okay. So is it harder to gauge?
Can you
remote
get
learners?
closer to the mic maybe? I don't know. Maybe that will help. Thank
Is it harder to gauge remote learning students' mental health?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, are you saying like the fully remote students?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that it's a fair thing to say that it's harder to gauge that when they're fully remote, we lose that face-to-face contact with them. the students who are attending either with their cohorts or at the other levels, I think they're getting the same interactions with their teachers that they would have to recognize warning signs. But the fully remote students, it's definitely harder to see the warning signs for students. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So I was just kind of wondering if increased interaction with our staff allows us to identify mental health concerns easier when it's more in person interactive with our staff. Would that be a correct statement?
Yeah, I'm looking to the others. I think so.
I do. I think that is true. I think it does vary a lot among those remote learners. You know, for example, I do have some remote learners who meet with me and have a session where I can talk with them, but that's not true for all. And I think it does put a much more significant burden on the parent to be watchful for those signs. And some of those students also have can also access the KVH counseling services as well, and some of them do. So I would say that Kim, I would agree with Kim. I think it is harder, but we do have many of them that do still have support.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Sean.
So, turn it off. So to all students, I know you mentioned that the high school students can use technology to contact you, but is that available to all students at all grade levels? Because sometimes some of the strengths you hear about, you may not be able to use the phone or something to call, you may just be able to send a message. Is that available to all students? Is it email or communication with you folks, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the high school has it available to everyone. So I think we're asking Gwen, is that universal for middle schoolers? And then what's available for elementary school, right? Am I understanding the question?
Okay, sorry, the audio is a little, I get bits and pieces. Yes, we have one-to-one technology in the middle school, and students do email and have access to that. Yes.
I guess for a follow-up, since we've gone remote, have you seen an increase in the number of students you're seeing, or a decrease, or has it stayed the same?
For me, I think I'm seeing about the same number of kids. On a regular basis between both schools, I probably see 16 to 18 kids. And that can vary because I have a few that, I'll need to check in on that comes up that particular day. But this is not higher or lower than any previous years.
Thank you.
It's a great question. When we had the SEL pillar this past summer, to think about the supports and to anticipate what our students might need, I think we would have said that it would have been much higher than what we're seeing. So, because I think it's about the same for me as well. I don't think it's a lot higher than it has been in a typical year, which is surprising to me, frankly.
Any further questions? Thank you for your report. This is excellent.
Thank you.
You're doing a good job.
Welcome. Welcome.
Wait, I couldn't hear. Are we moving away from this? Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Gary. Before we go, can I just say, when you put, you all are incredible, and it's really trying year. And when you put down on paper all of the things that you do to support our kids, it's like, whoa, it is incredible what you do. And I really appreciate it. I think we all really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
certain copies in our budget related.
So I do want to point out that there was a citizen that sent in a letter to the board. It's in your board packet. I just wanted to acknowledge that it's in the packet now. But you guys read it at your convenience. Although he did include some digital attachments that we also forwarded on to you, just so you know. So just wanted to acknowledge that that was there. I don't believe we have any other in-person comments. It's taken from the in-person audience. I don't know if there's anyone online.
No. Moving on, adjustments to the agenda.
So I would like to add a 5G, just information around the testing letter that I sent out earlier this week, along with information that I got at a superintendent's meeting about vaccines. Just want to give you a quick update of the things that I heard at that meeting. So that would be 5G, and I promise it will only take a couple of minutes.
Okay.
I move to approve the minutes of January 6, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call. Yes.
Roll call. Kim?
Yes.
Tony? Yes. Dave?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes. Melissa, are you back online?
Yes.
Awesome. Alex?
Yes.
Patty?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
And Sean?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And David?
Yes.
So unanimous. Thank you. I move to accept the teacher resignation effective February 5th, 2021, high school German, Justin Fecto with equal.
Second.
Any further discussion?
And again, his letter is in your folder, just so you know.
Roll call.
So instead of this letter, I was trying to find it. That he asked to stay on to help with the gap program, and I know that's important to at least the past 9 students. Are you allowing him to?
Yeah, I worked it out with Justin, and I actually really look forward to that. We have a nomination going forward, and I think it's a huge support for that person going forward, so we don't lose any traction on that project. Justin's figured out well, so I really want to support him going forward to make sure that we're going to be strong.
Thank you.
Roll call.
All right, Kim?
Yes.
Wendy? Yes. Dave?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes, with many thanks and regret. Melissa?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Patty?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And David? Yes. Unanimous. I move to appoint the first probationary contract teacher, high school German, Barry Anderson.
Second.
Any discussion?
So just so you guys know, as you look that over, Carrie's coming to us with a passion for the language. She actually worked for CIEE, which is a travel company, and her specialty was arranging German travel trips. So she was a teacher, she worked on travel, and unfortunately they experienced a lot of problems during COVID because of travel. So that's when she decided to jump back into teaching, and we're very lucky to get her. I think she's going to be a fantastic fit going forward. Everyone's very excited to get her here. So we're very, very lucky. German teachers are far and between, and I think we've got another one coming in that's going to be a fabulous.
Roll call.
All right, Kim?
Yes.
Wendy? Yes. Dane?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Alex?
Yes.
Patty,
Yes.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
and David.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
We're up to you.
All right, so up to me. So just very quickly, I wanted to let you know, just kind of follow up with the board with the testing has been a real issue. So there's two kinds of tests, and I know you guys have heard this language, so I apologize. I'll just try to get through it as quick as I can. But a PCR test is like the one where they swab in your nose, and they typically send it out. The rapid test is, again, it's kind of a swab, but it's a very quick turnaround test. What we're finding is that most kids that have had to go into quarantine or tested positive are testing with the PCR test. That one's kind of the gold standard. So what we found in a couple of cases recently was people were considered close contacts. They got rapid tests that said they were negative, but around day 9 or 10, they actually were testing positive. Their doctor recommended they go get a PCR test. They started to show symptoms. So we felt it would be smart to just say if you have an exposure that you're getting a PCR test rather than the rapid test. So if you get a rapid test, we will still accept it, but we're going to go with the 14-day quarantine because of our concerns around symptoms cropping up on day 9, 10, 11. If you come back with a PCR test, then that's a 10-day quarantine, and that'll be as far as we go with it. Again, it's more of a measure in an effort to be able to keep the schools open more than anything else. So that's kind of where we're coming from with that. And we know that's a little bit above and beyond what CDC is recommending. But again, if we want to keep our schools open, I think we've got to be a little more cautious right now. And one of the things I talked with Wendy about is we did put information in here. It was just a link to the site about where to get tests and that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is on Friday, when I send another update out, I'm actually going to put more specific information about those locations specific to our area, so that'll hopefully help parents navigate that situation, because we do know that it can be daunting, I guess is the word, when you've got a child and you're trying to figure out what's the next step I have to do to get them back to school. So we're going to put out another communication with more specific information for our area. So wanted to give you that information just in case people were asking questions of you going forward. The other thing is I was at a superintendent's meeting Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, and we heard from Pender. She spoke to us directly. Teachers were originally in the group 1B category. They are now in the 1C category. So once 1B is done, then they'll open it up to teachers, and there's a couple other people in that category, or a couple other groups, I should say, in that category. When Pender was talking to us, you could tell she was very, what's the word? I want to say she was troubled by that move by the governor, because it was a move that was done by the governor, and Pender really didn't have much control over that. So she wasn't happy with it, but again, she's kind of doing what she's supposed to do as the commissioner. So she was informing us. One of the things that she did say was that the timeline would probably be closer to April before it would be available to teachers, which was a little distressing to me. But again, that could change, like so many other things that have gone on with this pandemic. Things seem to change quite a bit. So I'm hopeful it'll be sooner than that. But we will also probably have to plan for some teacher absences when they start to go through the vaccine process. That was the other thing they kind of said, you better start planning for that, because there will be teachers out most likely at the second dose. That's the one that it tends to hit people a little harder. Not everyone, but some people a little bit harder than the first dose does. So they are really encouraging us to start to think about a plan of some sort. and they said they would be providing us resources to help with that plan. But I just wanted to kind of give you that update. Again, that could change, but that's what I heard last Thursday afternoon directly from Pender. So I just wanted to give you guys that update so you knew what I knew, and some of you guys may even have more information than that, I'm not sure. Sean shaking his head. So yeah, it was not good news. That conversation, Pender was definitely on the spot. There was a lot of superintendents that were not happy when we heard that news. So it made our jobs continue to be more challenging rather than less challenging. So I can answer any questions about either of those things if you want, or I can jump right into the budget stuff. Whatever, it's pleasure of the board.
I just have a quick question. Who was responsible for that the new mandate for testing?
Say that, I just didn't hear you, Dane, sorry.
Who was responsible, like who was in the meeting, I guess, to come up with the new mandating of?
The nurse, I had asked the nurses to communicate with DOE and CDC around that, and they were the ones that brought me that recommendation saying that's what we should be doing. It came directly from them, and I very much trust them, so that's why I went with it.
So they're saying that came from the DOE? They're saying it came from the DOE?
They're saying, well, see, what happened is when they switched from the 14-day quarantine to the 10-day quarantine, they didn't outline that testing part. The PCR test is kind of the gold standard. So that's why they really want to stick with, let's get everyone to use the PCR.
I just have a hard time with mandating the community of a school telling parents that you will get a PCR test or your kid will not be back with 14 days. I have a very hard time with that, and I'm sure there's many of the community members that do. So I'm going to have some further discussion and questions about that. That's, I think, overstepping.
No, I know it's all about trying to keep schools open. So
right, and I mean, this isn't the only school, in the district or in the local area that has COVID. Every other school is doing the same testing. Winthrop is doing the 10-day. I don't know, I don't see the purpose.
And I'll be very, very honest. I'd say 99% of our students are coming back with PCR tests. I really haven't
Which is good. So for reason to mandate, why are we mandating?
To try
why are you mandating
open.
and then you can't come back for 14 days if you don't do it?
Just to try to keep schools open. The more we can be safe, the more we can.
Again, I think we're overstepping our boundaries here.
No, I get what you're saying. I knew it wouldn't be something that would be totally approved by everyone. I knew that, so.
I would call it not as much a mandate as.
It says it in the verbiage, mandate.
I'm saying.
The CDC, main CDC says should. Should, mandate, two different words.
What we're saying is they can get either test, but if you get the rapid test, safety says that you need to come back a little bit later than if you get the other test. It's not saying you can't go with either test. Whatever they call it, mandate or not, it's saying that in order to come back in 10 days.
Right, it's a mandate. If you get this one test, you're mandated to work out the 14 days.
Mandate is a seatbelt thing. They can call it a mandate.
You keep, it is a mandate. It says it in the paper, it says it in the paperwork. The parents don't have a choice. If you don't get the test, you have to wait the 14 days. That is a mandate. There's not a choice.
So what is your problem with the mandate? I mean, just because you don't like being told what to do? Because as far as I've heard, this mandate is put in place for a reason by people who are educated and make educated decisions. Are you just getting butthurt about the word mandate?
The CDC, the major CDC is the one who changed it, and the main CDC has recognized that, but RSU 38 has not. That's my question.
So we're taking that extra step to ensure that our kids stay healthy, and you have a problem because of that word mandate. What would you like that verbiage to sound like? We would lightly suggest. Would you prefer that?
That's called a choice. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate your time.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I guess, I don't have so much an issue that, I trust the school nurses. I know some of them personally, but this is a policy change. This isn't like the state said we had to do this. This is a policy change. And this is one of my issues with COVID, not just with school board, but all around. It's really given people a green light to kind of freely do what they want. I'm going to be blunt about it. And this is a policy change. This isn't like DOE or CDC recommended or said we had to do this. This is a decision we made, and it is very clear we are a policy committee. So I guess more so, I'm not saying I disagree. We should be doing this or not, but I think when we're changing policy to make something more stringent, I'd probably take this. I don't know if I'd take the school nurse. I don't know how I'd vote. I probably would vote with them if they had the science to back it up, but that is a policy decision to make something more stringent than what the state is doing. And we are a policy committee. So I just want to point that out, because if I would have let this go, what's the next thing that we let go? And I feel that's happening. I feel not just in school boards, but other things I'm involved in. People are losing their powers because, we're in a state of emergency and we just got to let people do what they want. So I'm not saying I disagree with what was done, but I think it's a policy change.
So Sean, or Dane, would it be beneficial if we had the discussion on this next meeting, or, how would we like to proceed?
So why we need another meeting? Why we just discussing it right now?
Well, we could invite the nurses, or
The nurses
Jay
are online,
could-
aren't they?
No, that's
yeah, I don't know. We could bring in more people, or we could bring in more information. I'm just hoping it out.
I can speak for myself. I'm fine with the decision's been made. I don't want to put anyone on the spot or make anyone defend, but I guess I'm more speaking. This is a policy change. It wasn't like the DOE said, we need to do this. To me, it's about any other policy. I'm about keeping children safe. Obviously, I have 2 kids that go to school. You hear me talk about them all the time. But this is a policy change. We are making something more stringent than state guidelines. So for me,
Go ahead,
I'm
David.
fine and moving on. I just wanted to point that out.
Hey, David?
I don't disagree that it is changing things that way. I've got no problem. I would, unless people disagree, I would move that we that we as a board vote to change the policy to continue the requirement that a test be gotten before returning, but allow that they may get either test, but according to nursing or CDC or whatever recommendations, if it's the rapid test, they would need to stay out 14 days. And if it's the PCR test, they could return in 10. So that we do not use the mandate, because people should have the choice since the choice is available, but that for everybody's safety, if they're going to take the less reliable test, they would be asked to stay out a little bit longer.
So
that is my motion,
That's your motion?
in shorter words.
Is there a second on that?
If not, we can just let it go.
Okay, I need a little clarification. So when we say policy, we're not referring to board policies. We're just referring to a administrative policy concerning testing. Right? Yes.
Sounds good.
Well, okay, well, when we refer to policy, I'm sorry, it just, there's like board policy and then there's administrative, and there's a big difference between the two.
Well, Sean was referring to this as a policy body. And so if we're going to do this, we're making that a board policy change, I would think. if it's not a board policy, then it's an administration policy, and it wouldn't, within my thought, but you can address that, Sean, fall under our full decision-making power. We could still say something about it, but that we wouldn't have to change our policy. But I don't know what you guys think.
I can't see you guys. Can I say something? It doesn't seem like it's a board policy like SR 1523, like in that volume of policies. It seems like it's an administrative thing, though I understand what you're saying, Sean, that it's a policy. But I think if it's an administrative policy, then Jay, and with the consultation of the medical professionals, is totally within reason to just make it happen that way. And we can like it or not like it, but it can be, I don't know that it's our place to do anything about it.
So I don't think it's a board policy either, but I do think it's an administrative procedure.
Yes.
And I kind of agree with what David's saying. I don't like the mandate part of it. I agree with what Dane and Sean are saying. So I think if we are supporting this administrative procedure, I could better support it if it was a choice that parents had, and knowing up front, okay, if you get this test, it's 10 days. If you get this test, it's 14 days. Your choice, rather than say you cannot come back for 14 days if you don't have the PCR test.
So I think that's what David said. So if it's an administrative, all we need to say is we'll support it on an administrative basis.
Rather than a motion, which I withdraw, as long as there's consensus, that's the recommendation from the board to change the wording.
And I can do that. I can resend this on Fridays.
So if we are going for a board consensus, can we make sure that we have that consensus before we just move forward?
And we have a roll call on, we have a motion. Alex, you second it?
Well, I think we need to change the motion then. Perhaps what Kathy said should be the motion.
Right.
Okay.
And I will second it.
Okay.
It should be worded as a
choice.
There you go.
So like the last half.
I agree.
Okay. That's the motion.
We got to,
Well,
so now
before,
we're going to have a roll call.
wait, before we vote on anything, can we just reread it real quick? Just there was the beginning part that Kathy mentioned, but it's the last part that is kind of the actual motion.
So what I understand the motion to be is that rewrite it so that it's reflective as a choice, not as a mandate or a requirement, that there's a choice and it's either this or this as the choice.
Okay.
So that it's clear to people that they do have a choice.
And the choice includes the consequences of whichever choice you make.
Right. As I look at my letter, that's this paragraph, and it's rewrite it as a choice and give them the choices clearly, so.
Okay, perfect. All right.
So roll call.
David did.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we all set to vote? Gary's calling roll call, okay. Sorry, Kim,
I'm going to abstain because I couldn't hear it all the discussion very well, so I'll just abstain.
okay. Wendy,
Yes.
Dane,
No.
Kathy,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes?
Patty,
Oops, yes.
Rebecca,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
and David.
Yes.
Okay. So we had one abstention, one no, and the rest yes. So 9 yes, did I count
Yeah.
that right? Yep, 9 to
There we
1 to
go.
1. Okay, so I will put that out in Friday's update that I send out. I'll reword that paragraph make it a choice, and it'll be out on Friday, so, okay?
Okay, thank you, Jay.
Yep,
You're
you're
going to tell them
welcome.
where to get the test?
Yes, and I will add that in, yep,
All right, budget workshop.
can do that. All right, thank you, everyone. All
So-
right, so,
Enrollments, what about?
budgets. All
Budget
right,
workshop.
hang on just a sec. I'm actually going to switch places and jump up there. So, so number one, so Bridget's closer to me. So if we have questions, she can help me answer those questions. The second, for the viewing audience as well, it makes it a little easier for them to follow along. So bear with me for just a sec. What's that? Yep. So as Diane is kind of getting things ready, so I pulled out my first folder, and this will be totally packed full. For those of you guys that are new, it'll be like that by the time we get to June. You guys will have lots and lots of papers in front of you. So I thought it made sense to take some time today to talk about the basics of putting together a budget and be able to answer some questions going forward as well, especially for those of you guys that have been around for a while. I think it'll be very helpful going forward so that you can help out people who are going through the budget process for the first time. So again, our goal is, and we set this the last meeting, to support all students' academic, social, and emotional success while maintaining physical responsibility. So that's kind of our baseline. That's what the lens we're always looking through as we go forward. So you'll see that a lot as we go through the budget season. So for today's focus, we're going to focus on a couple of things. Try to keep it simple as this first one. So the first thing that we'll talk about is enrollments and valuation, and connect that to the ED 279 along with the local share that we will have to raise to fund our schools. The second thing that we'll talk about is the directives that I gave my administrators and my managers, so that you guys kind of have that baseline as well going forward. And then the third thing is just talk about what is the process and what is the timeline going forward with this, so you kind of can see the long range vision of where we're going. Having said all of that, the first thing we're going to start with is enrollments. So what I did is I went back, because this is going to be one of our big challenges in enrollments. So again, when you're thinking about the budget that comes, whether it's our share or the state share, there's two major factors that come into play: enrollments and what is property valuation in your town. Those are the two deciding factors. So what I wanted to do was pull some baseline data for you guys and give you guys kind of a picture. This is a very different year enrollment-wise, and it has led to a lot of questions from the state. One of the mandates, or one of the it's written in statute, is that as part of your subsidy, they have to use the previous year October count, or excuse me, your fall October count with your students. Doesn't matter what students you have in January or February or March or December, they look at that October number. That's what we have to build off of. So this year, we have 1,137 students enrolled in our schools. Last year, we had 1,200 students. That's a difference. We've lost 63 students, which accounts for just a little over 5% of our population. Now, Though that number I'm going to refer back to in a few minutes, but I wanted to give you some context again. So that those 63 students, if you look at our difference in homeschooling, it pretty much accounts for that difference. This year we had 78 students that chose to homeschool. Last year we only had 20. That's a difference of 58 kids when we had 63 as a total change, and 58 of them can be almost directly accounted to homeschooling. What that says to me is probably a good chunk of those students are going to be coming back in the fall. However, they're not in that October 1st, 2020 count. What is in that October 1st, 2020 count is our in-district transfers. So this is an elementary number for the most part, but we've got 27 students that are going to a school not in the town they live in. There are students, but they've chosen to go to a different school. For example, you might have, I'll use a very simple one. In Wayne, the pre-K students go to Reedfield for pre-K. So those 3 students, there's 3 of them, they are in Reedfield, but they actually belong to Wayne. Does that make sense? So we've got 27 of those students between our 4 elementary schools. We've got 27 students. Now, superintendent agreements are students that are coming from outside our district. So they don't live in Wayne, Manchester, Reedfield, or Mount Vernon. They're coming from somewhere else. So for example, we may get a student from Monmouth. We may get a student from Winthrop. This year we have 51 of those students. They are included in that subsidy number, or excuse me, that number 1,137. Those students are there. We also have 62 tuition students. Now, the vast majority of our tuition students come from Fayette because we have an agreement with them. But we do have a couple of tuition students that come from other schools come through. But number 1, number 3, number 4, and number 5 factor into that 1,137 students that we have. All right, let's keep going. So what does that all mean for the ED 279? And I will share this presentation with you guys so you can dig into it a little deeper going forward. So they look on the ED 279, it's basically broken again into 2 parts. One part is about students and enrollments. The second part's about evaluation. So let's talk about the enrollment for students for just a second. So they take all of our students together. So that 1,137 students, that includes our tuition students, our superintendents, our in-district transfers. All of those are there. Homeschool students are not in that number. So that's an important thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we go forward here. So it's all enrollments, and they use that number to calculate their per pupil amount that they're going to give us for each student. Okay, makes sense so far? Okay, then if we go to the next slide, the next part is valuation, property. That's exactly what it is. So in this one, this is where it gets confusing because they use a different number now. In this one, they look at only students that live in your towns. Okay, so tuition students are not included in this number. Superintendent agreements are not included in that number. That's 113 kids that you're dropping out of that 1,137. That's 113 kids you're dropping out right away. Okay. They only look at students that live in our 4 towns. That's it. That's the number they use to calculate the mill rate. So again, none of this stuff is secret, top secret or anything like that. It is very, very involved. It's several pages long. It's actually 6 pages long, but you can actually go online. I put the link there. You can actually go online and check out our ED 279 is going back about 6 or 7 years there. So you can kind of look at the trends that are happening as you go forward. So going on to the next slide. So the valuations come directly from the state. So again, I put the link in there so you can see, but when you're looking at this, pardon me for just a sec. I have my highlighted copy. I may have zoomed right past it. Yep, there it is. Sorry about that, guys. So Manchester's evaluations, and I know it's really hard to see on that screen, is $329,900,000. Mount Vernon, $254,050,000. Reedfield, $500,000. Wayne, $208,200,000. So those numbers that we have no control over. We have to use what the state gives us for that. And one of the things when you start to go digging, you're going to say, wait, that doesn't match what the town has. We have no control over that. We have to use the state numbers going forward. So it's really important that you kind of know where the big numbers are coming from as we go forward. So one of the things that came up last year was the discussion around the idea of, well, how are those students getting charged off? The in-district students, the superintendent agreements, the tuition students. Tuition's an easy one. They don't factor in at all because we're getting the tuition money for them. So they don't come into the formula at all. So moving into this, what I'd like to do is to take the in-district transfers. They can still, like if you've got a Wayne student going to Reedfield, they're still going to go to Reedfield, but what we'll do is charge those students back into Wayne. That count will be the Wayne count, even though they're going to school in Reedfield on down the line. What we will do with superintendent agreements is we will completely back those out so no town is charged for, like, their student count won't include 5 superintendent agreements. We'll just back those out of the formula right away. So that way the towns will only have the students from their town. Does that make sense? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Have I messed anything up, Bridget? So far, so good? Yay. If Bridget gives me a thumbs up, I know I'm doing well. So
Wait a minute here. Hold on.
yeah, okay.
I ain't buying that. Because each town has to support those 51 kids. And so what I'm telling you is that the valuation should be the factor of how you divide that 51 up against all 4 towns. Because all 4 towns have to kick in money for those 51. And it should be proportional to the valuation.
Do you want to? I know what he's saying. Yeah. Do you mind clarifying for it? Do you mind coming up? Okay. This is where I depend on Bridget so that I can navigate what's being asked.
Okay, we'll put this down a little bit. So I know what you're saying, Gary, and I will tell you that I have checked the percentages. I've done it by just resident students, by town, shifting the kids back to the towns that they belong in, even though they may be going to a different elementary school. And then in the past, what we've done with superintendent's agreements is if they were attending one of the elementary schools, that elementary school it was put into their account. And at middle school and high school, we just broke them out, each as the numbers came in, say there were 10 of them, Manchester would get 1, Mount Vernon would get 1, Reedfield would get 1. And so last year, the way it was done is we spread those superintendent's agreements out. So I took last year's figures, compared resident-only students versus resident plus superintendent's agreements. The biggest change I had in a formula was a 0.42%. It didn't make a big difference. But I do understand what you're saying. You're saying take the 51, look at the percentage of resident students in each town, take those percentages and add on to it that percentage of superintendent's agreements to get a new total. It won't shift the percentages a great deal.
So last year, when I sat down with the numbers, I noticed Reedfield obtained more students than any other town. But Manchester and Wayne pays a heck of a lot more per student. And I just think it needs to be evaluated according to this valuation.
The valuation is what drives those big changes between what each school pays. It's not the per pupil count. It's the valuation. What the state bases their mandated match on is valuation, and 50% of the additional local that is raised by our towns is based on valuation. And that's what really drives the changes in the per pupil counts between the towns. It's not the per pupil count, the actual students. It's the valuation that drives that change.
Makes sense.
We certainly can keep talking about it when it comes to that.
We will.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
we will talk about it further as we get out there and we see the numbers.
Yep, exactly. That's what I was going to say. We can bring those numbers forward to you, as we go through. The other thing to remember is we get a subsidy later on in the year for all of our superintendent agreements. So that's also something to keep in mind as you're going forward. So I don't want you guys to feel like, oh, we've got to do something to address that right away when we're actually getting a subsidy check that accounts for those 51 superintendent agreements. We only get it later in the year, and we don't know exactly what that's going to be until we get it. So, so that's a really good point. So, yes, of course, Alex, before I go further.
Has the tuition rate changed?
Has the tuition, I do not believe it has changed. I'll have to double check that though. Oh, we just got it. Okay.
Is it good news or bad news? Okay, Bridge is laughing. That's not a good sign.
The middle school went up about $500 per student.
Okay.
And the high school is a mandated cap.
Right.
Yeah.
The high school is a mandated cap. The state will cap the high school tuition amount, and that only went up a very slight amount. But the middle school tuition is based on the state's formula of calculating that, went up about $500 per student.
Okay, thank you.
So again, I encourage you guys to take a look at when you have a chance, because it's pretty dense. You almost need an accounting degree to get through the ED 279 and then all the evaluation numbers that go along with that. It's pretty dense, but I do encourage you, I will forward this on to you, and I encourage you to take a look at those things because the more you know, the easier it's going to be going forward to make decisions. So when we look at our additional local calculations, remember, this is by the charter agreement when RSU 38 was formed, that you're looking at 50% of your local additional you raise per town is going to be based on student count, and then 50% is going to be on property valuation. Remember, we use a 3-year rolling average of that going forward. So it's not just one single year. Take the 3 years, add them together, divide by 3. That's the number you actually use. So it is a 3-year rolling average from this. But again, we'll put the in-district transfers when we're calculating stuff will be by town, and the superintendent agreements will be backed out. And again, we can look at numbers as we go forward and what that means for you. But I just kind of wanted to make that clear to everyone going forward, kind of how we were handling that. All right, I'm going to switch gears on you guys now and talk about the directives that I gave administrators and managers as they were looking to put the budget together. So the team directives were little to no increase in overall spending. Last year, I had given them a target of 2%. This year, we're shooting for 0%. So again, that's kind of a tall order, but we're going to see how close we can get. You know, once we start to put everything together, we'll see how close we can get to that. Now, we also, going through this process, are trying to increase transparency, equity of spending practices. So instructional lines are based on number of students in a building with an additional allocation going to those schools that are identified as Title I schools. I started this last year. It seems to work very well when you start to look at a per pupil amount and they build the budget out that way. Class sizes, again, we're looking to try to maintain what we were looking at last year. Elementary of 15 to 20 students, middle school 18 to 22 students, and the high school would be 10 or more students in any one class. High school is a little different animal because of the classes and the different variations they offer. But again, trying to keep a consistent number there. We will look at positions, but they may not be filled just automatically. It will be based on a need, a perceived need going forward with this. So just because a position leaves doesn't mean it's automatically filled. I'll use German just very quickly because we did that. We only have one German teacher, so there's really no discussion when it comes to that. So as an example, but each position will be looked at and determined on a case-by-case basis if we're actually going to look to fill them. As we go to the next slide, we also don't want this process to become contentious between the towns and the district, so we want to try to keep everything kind of right up front as we go forward. And then, of course, as part of the administrative team, we continue to have meetings. We just started having meetings, but we will continue to have meetings and discuss the factors that affect the budget, and we'll review requests as a team based on the overall goal that I shared, that we had come up with last time, and that I shared with the board. So that's kind of what I asked them to do. We really are shooting for 0, and we'll see how far we can go or how close we can get to that number. Everyone understands the time we're in, and I think when you look at the student drop that we've had with 63 student change, we know that that becomes kind of imperative to make sure that we're being very smart about what we're asking for, why we're asking for it, and making sure it's getting to students as much as possible, those resources. So the timeline is our last thing before I start to take questions. So if you'll take a look at page 7 in your handout in your board packet. Oops, sorry, got to get to it. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but just for a reminder of how it's going to work, what we're going to do is new requests typically come forward to the board, whether it's from the elementary principals, middle school, high school principals, as well as special ed, all that kind of stuff. New things come forward so that we can have thoughtful discussions about the need for those programs and if we're going to support them. So we have a series of board workshops where different directors, managers, principals will talk with you guys. One of the things that I want to point out to you is on February 24th, we have technology as well as operations and maintenance coming in. We thought that would be an appropriate time as well to talk about the money that we have left in our bond, as well as the COVID grants that we have had through the course of this year, that federal money that we received, because we are getting, and most of you have heard this, we were notified of another round of ESSER monies that were going to come to schools. We don't know that amount yet, and the application isn't open. We expect the end of next week that we're probably going to have all that information, but we figured that would make sense to kind of say, okay, how did we use that money? Going forward, what was the benefit to our students from that? Then, as you're looking down, we will have our auditors who will come in on March 17. That's another kind of important one because they are able to give us kind of a rundown of the health of our district financially. And as you guys know, especially those that have been around, Bridget would not let us catch a cold financially. So we're typically in really good shape from that. But it is good to hear from the auditors as to what's going on. And then we start pretty much on March 10, 17, and 24, we'll have a lot of deliberations on where we're going with the budget and things that we may have to discuss as to do we really want them or not, what's the timeline, et cetera. And then when you're looking at the end of the paper there, the actual workshop meeting that we take a vote on the budget is April 14. That's been the date that we've used so that we can have everything ready for the annual meeting, which is May 19th, followed up by the budget validation process at the town on June 8. Knock on wood, that all kind of happens the way it's supposed to right now. The governor did put an executive order that was similar to last year, where if we needed to do our annual meeting on the 19th as a remote meeting, we do have that option. Last year we held it and everything went fine, but the option will be there and we can talk about it as we get closer if we need to do that or not to make a change. So again, so every meeting going forward, as you're looking at this, we will have the same basic thing on the agenda that you see on number 6 right now, where we will have a presentation. Tonight it was me just kind of laying the groundwork, but you'll see a presentation from those people who are scheduled to go forward. There will be a line where it says board questions like letter D, as well as citizen comments on the budget at this time going forward, followed by board discussion. We don't need to make motions because it's just going to be deliberations going forward. So it's not like you're making lots of motions. It's whittling the budget down, sharing ideas, and coming to kind of a consensus on how to move forward. You guys generally give direction to myself, and then I rely a lot on Bridget to help me figure out the directive and make sure we meet the goal that was put forward there. So that's kind of what you'll see at every meeting going forward now. So just wanted to kind of put that out there and remind people about that as we go forward. Questions, I'll kind of go there next. Questions.
So the new COVID relief is a 3-year grant, if I recall.
Yes, it runs out in 2023. Exactly right. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean.
Okay. Has there been, I mean, maybe this is too early, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Has there been any talk of either adding someone to help with remote learning or moving resources around? Because it's going to be blunt. It still seems to be a struggle.
Yeah.
And I hear about it. I mean, today's remote learning was an hour because we had remote learning on Friday and we put a lot of effort into that is what we were told.
Yeah.
So I think we really need to put some focus to help teachers make that better because I don't see it going away.
Right. I agree with that, Sean. And absolutely, we're really looking, again, we don't know the money exactly what it's going to be, but I'm really looking at trying to focus on student needs and making sure we're getting the resources to the students. That may be hiring a teacher or whatnot for, that 2-year period to be able to help run a more effective remote learning environment. So you're thinking exactly what I was thinking.
Thank you. I know we want to stick to 0, but there is reality too. I mean, if we can't meet the needs of the students and not hiding it, I don't think we are necessarily.
Right.
So.
Right.
We did discuss a math interventionist for the Mount Vernon Wayne operation.
Yeah.
That's going to be brought before us.
Yeah.
I do know that.
Yeah. Yep.
Any further discussions?
might want to just double check the people online because don't want
Online.
them to be forgotten.
Anybody online? All mouths closed.
There's one mouth. This is Tom Maloki speaking. I'm a resident of Reedfield. I would like to commend the administrative staff for putting forth a directive to the administrator or the administrators in each area as a 0% increase for a guideline. As a senior citizen who has to watch his pennies, and to hear what the nurses and the mental health staff are doing, I really feel we're getting a good bang for our buck at this point. And I would like to commend Jay and his leadership team for looking at the reality of where we are, looking at people's pocketbooks, and most of all, looking at the kids and doing the best we can. Thank you for putting that 0% forward. That's it.
Thank you.
And just real quickly, I missed something as we were going through. We do an annual, we belong to NASDAQ, the New England School Development Council, and they do an annual survey, study for us around population. It does show that going into next year that our population rebounds. So again, I think, their 3 years that I've used them, they've been very consistent and pretty close to right on. So I really do think we're going to see a rebound in our enrollments from those homeschool students.
Go ahead, Sean.
Earlier on, I think you talked about 67 students homeschooling. Do we know why though? I mean, has anyone tried to find out why? Because, I mean, some students aren't very involved with the vaccine issue. People are leaving or not going to put their kids in school or going to have to make that decision.
From what I know, and I'm limited in that, I would say the principals are probably would have a better read on that. But I think a lot of it had to do with underlying health conditions and stuff. That's what I've heard. But again, I don't hear everything. Yeah, that's the read I get is definitely that. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Any further discussions? Adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.